Is there a doctor in the house?
Doctor, you have a visitor in the main lobby.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Talk to the Doc podcast, where I'm sliding into an executive take on security. Today, Craig Taylor joins me to kind of help brainstorm that for our listeners. So let's go ahead and get into it. Welcome, Craig. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks, Steve. It's really great to be here, and I'm excited to be on your show. A little bit about myself. Well, I am a very interesting cybersecurity professional in that my background and my degree 30 plus years ago was in psychology,
Oh, nice.
not in computer science. And back in those days, there was no cybersecurity major, right? So the industry has kind of grown up around me as I, passed through my career. But I've done a lot of things in my career. I've done a lot of risk management, been a global, what we used to call a LIRM, a lead information risk manager. It's become more fashionable probably in the last 10 years to call it a virtual or fractional CISO when I support multiple accounts. It's really the only difference between a virtual and fractional CISO and a full-time CISO is the legal liability. We're advisors. We are not officers of the companies we support. That's an important distinction. But throughout my career, I've been a community activist. I do a bunch of fundraising for cancer research. I just try to be involved. I'm a Rotarian, a competent Toastmaster, and a hockey coach. All these different things sort of make up who Craig is.
Well, that's awesome. I love the well-blended personality. I always like to think that what we do requires a little bit of information from everywhere. And, especially in the world of cybersecurity, that ability to be over here and think tangentially to it, to bring this logic, this mentality, this structure from somewhere else. There's a lot of value to that in everything that we do.
I agree. It's a net benefit, I think, overall.
You probably don't sleep a lot at night, do you?
Actually, that's the one thing I never used to. I used to think you can sleep when you're dead, if you want my honest personal opinion about these things. But I've recently had enough podcasts that I've listened to about the longevity effects of sleep or lack of sleep. You can really damage your body and your mind by depriving it of that regeneration. So I've been trying to get more sleep. And if you were pointing out the fact that I have a lot to worry about, I actually sleep quite soundly, giving the advice that we do at my company, CyberHoot, to the world and helping our clients sleep at night, knowing they're doing the things they need to spend their finite time and money on the most important risks that they face. So yeah, I think we all sleep better knowing we're doing this approach.
Right. Well, it's a doctor's appointment. It sounds like you may not need a visit, so maybe there's just an annual. Let's go ahead and get into the vitals and kind of start talking about stuff because it sounds like it's going to be really interesting. So the first vital I always take from all my patients is the pulse, and I think of the pulse as kind of that current state of the market or industry trend. And you threw out a number to me, pulling from the Verizon 2024 Data Breach Investigations report, DBIR in our parlance. But you said that a breach at a small business costs anywhere from $120K to $1.2 million, depending on severity. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would say depending on severity and size, right? If you have a small micro business where you're maybe making $500,000 a year, your cost of your breach is going to be a little bit smaller. You may or may not have insurance to help you with the payments and the cost of things, but there's a lot of variability in the cost of breaches. But I will say this, there's always universal truths. They are painful, time consuming. When you're in the throes of an incident, you're not responding to your customers the way they want to be heard. You're not serving them. You're not building whatever widgets you need to build. Everything is basically stopped and you're responding to the hacker or the ransom event. And you may or may not have to bring in legal counsel, your insurance provider, a forensic team, an incident commander, your CISO or virtual or fractional CISO, if you have one, to help get you through navigating through that incident. There's a lot of nuances to that. And, you have to understand what data you have, what's sensitive, what's not, What did they access? What didn't they access? Do you run a business where you know and have good data management? What I mean by that is I've walked into breaches where there's 25 years of client records online on their server, and that's what's been encrypted. Now they have 25 years of clients to go notify if they had sensitive data on them. I've been in other businesses where they purge everything after 5 years onto a worm drive, a write once, read many, WORM. And they're happy, like they have so much less work to do. Every one of those things that you have to do, from forensics to legal to compliance and legislative, they all cost money and it adds up quickly. So you can be a small business and have major costs and so on.
Well, I think you brought up a lot of things to unpack, talk a little bit more about. The first thing I'd like to dive into is one of the things you said that I thought was really perceptive, is that when you're dealing with an incident like this, that also means there's a trade-off of there's a whole bunch of stuff that you're not doing. They use the example of you're not answering the phone because you're busy with this. So when you're advising, when you're working with with a small business or whatever, what part do you think that they always underestimate? Just the interruption of normal work, the downtime, the reputational damage, having to pull everybody away, and that distraction. What do you think that they don't realize it's so impactful on?
Well, I'll be honest, we need to go back just to be a little bit before the incident and say they don't believe they're going to be hit. They don't believe they're a target. They don't have, I'm so small, nobody's going to target me. And you said in your opening comments that we all, hopefully everyone listening just realizes that they are a target and they could be breached no matter their size. And the reality is that's true. You could be a very small business and you will still be targeted, because sometimes it's indiscriminate. Other times it's very targeted on a business that they know carries insurance. If you publicly disclose you have cyber insurance, puts a target on your business, because they know, hackers know, if they encrypt your file successfully and put the correct extortion, levers in place, that you'll pay through your insurance and underwriter. Many schools are in that boat, but many other businesses as well. So the first big piece of disbelief I deal with is trying to convince people they could be targeted. Then, in the throes of it, they're surprised that their network is offline, their business, their PCs are shut down. We need to take a forensic image of anything that could have evidence. That's most of the servers. And if they have an old client server, most people have migrated to the cloud in these digital transformations. I'm sure the docs talked about that before, right, Steve? But if they do have some of that infrastructure, it's no longer accessible during the incident because we're taking an image and then we're digesting that image. We do try to make prioritized lists of getting things back online. So, yeah, the surprise is like, I can't print, I can't email, I can't do anything for a number of days. Then we slowly bring things back online. I mean, it sounds slow to the owners of the business. It's as fast as humanly possible to us forensic and incident responders. But, there's just so many hiccups along the way, right? Maybe the backups were destroyed or deleted. And so you're really going way back to an offline backup, which might not be current. Then you got to reconstruct your files and your data. All sorts of things can happen. Every incident is different, and there's just no winning in an incident. It's like a lot of drag on the business.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times I think that organizations may not recognize that if you've got a business network that you've cultivated over time, there's a lot of time and energy that goes into it to kind of put that all together. So even if you're just recovering from backups, let's say, there's so much data that can be a lot of time as well. And just understanding that even if you're throwing multiple people at the issue, it's just so hard to bring everything back online, depending on what redundancies and how much they've invested in, different things there. But it's just, you've taken this huge thing, then you're trying to do it all within a day or two, just makes it very difficult.
May I add one other thing that surprises people?
Sure.
Hackers have gotten a lot more savvy in their extortion methods. Go back 10 years ago and they encrypted your files. If you had good backups, you could restore them and ignore the ransom demands. Today, and I'm talking about the last 24 months, hackers are much better at exfiltrating the data and then threatening to release that data en masse to the internet. We had a big release today I saw a notice, 780 million social security numbers in the United States were released by a hacker for a company that didn't pay the ransom, etc. And so the extortion that's called double extortion. First, it's encrypt the files. If you can't get them back, you pay the ransom. Second was we release and embarrass you online with your client's records. That's a second extortion method. There's a third method that's sometimes in play and sometimes not, where they report you to the authorities, the hackers do, for not reporting a breach. If you're in a healthcare position, you have more than 500 records exposed, you have to report it to the Department of Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, and you have fines associated with that. Same for FINRA, for financials. So that's one. Uh, Most recently, and I hesitate to mention this, I think I'm going to start mentioning it because people need to know this. When a hacker's trolling around your internal networks, they usually get access to your client, not your client, but your employee records. And they know where all your staff live and work and their mobile phones and their home phones and things of that. Hackers have started extorting companies by calling employees at home and threatening them with harm because their employer won't pay the ransom. And then they freak out and they come to work and they say, what are you going to do? I mean, my family's at risk here. So it's really nasty what's gone on. And that's a surprise and a shock to a lot of companies. And really the only true response that you should be thinking about here is how do we do everything in our power to prevent it from happening to begin with?
Yeah, I can see where your background in psychology comes in to help deal with some of those things a little bit better. Just the psychology of the attacker. Things continue to evolve every year. Criminals are lazy but smart, and so they're always trying to find that. As soon as we come up with a defense, they come up with a new attack. As soon as we find a way to protect, they find a way to work around it. And so, it's easy for organizations to fall into this has been working for 2 years. It's still going to work next year, but that's just not the case. How do you keep on top of that? The ever evolving nature of attacks, but help and educate your audience in understanding that.
Well, that's a great question. And I would go back to some of my forethought about 5 or 6 years ago. I founded a peer group, just a group of virtual CISOs, fractional CISOs who get together once a month and we discuss problems, we discuss technologies, technical solutions, we discuss what's working, what's not working, what's an emerging threat. Almost every meeting for the last 9 months, 12 months has been AI driven. Some form of AI concerns comes up. Today I'm reading an AIification of attack readiness by hackers, an article, a white paper from Trend Micro out of Canada. They wrote a paper about all the different ways AI is being used by our adversaries to attack us. Some we know about, and some are interesting, developments that are emerging, and you kind of had in the back of your mind, yeah, this could be a problem in the future, but you didn't know if it was here yet. For example, deepfakes and phone impersonation. They can take a recording like our podcast today, and they could call anyone in my family and pretend to be Craig, or they could pretend to be the doc, Steve Meeks, and it would sound like you. And to your family members who they're telling you've been abducted and they're going to do harm to you, they need to know that it is or isn't Steve or Craig. So we in our family, we have a safe word. We have a safe word that only people who like myself or my family members would know and be able to provide in that incident. In financial transactions, wire fraud and financial crimes, they're doing the same thing. They're calling companies, pretending to be the CFO and the CEO. Those kinds of things are actually hitting the mainstream this year. So you might have heard about it as a experiment by cyber researchers or by, it happened once in the last 24 months in the news media, but it's going to become commonplace. And so that safe word for financial transactions or telling the person, I'll call you back on your known good number that I have in front of me, it shouldn't be a problem for the CFO. If he really needs that wire transfer, he'll say, sure, call me back. I'm glad you're doing that. If they say, no, you can't, you have to stay on the line, you have a problem. You're probably on an AI deepfake.
I think that's great. The same way we do with organizations that, through our accounts payable and whatever systems, we've got advanced communication and we've got process to help deal with those times where technology is allowing those attacks to come through. So I like how you apply that in your own personal life and, with your family, friends, whoever, to kind of make sure that you've got that safe word in the same way that we do it within organizations. I was just at a cybersecurity conference, and it's funny you mentioned your vCISO group. I've got a similar group here in DFW where I've pulled together a couple of. They're actually ex clients of mine who are now CISOs, full time CISOs for organizations. But we get together and talk a little bit, sharpen our knives, compare, contrast notes and stuff. So it's funny how similar we are. At the conference, they kind of went through one of those recent examples of a deep fake and went through kind of the whole process of everything that went through to get like a really, really large amount of money that you wouldn't have expected from an organization of that size. But it can get scary.
No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg, really, for AI threats that are emerging this year in 2026. We might have heard, your listeners might have heard of code vibe coding, using AI to write code. It's pretty good at it, but it doesn't necessarily check for vulnerabilities or 0 days in the code. So you need to be extra vigilant running dynamic and static code analyses and pen testing your code that's been developed under vibe coding, because there's new risks. And guess what? 0 day attacks are on steroids with AI scanning tools and automated agentic agents. So there's another threat in that arena. There's another threat with your own data privacy, right? Your company runs on data. It runs on the privileged and intellectual property that is unique to your business and your client's business. And if that gets put into public LLMs, it can be indexed, it can be sorted, it can be regurgitated to other competitors or to anyone on the internet. So companies are deadly, and rightfully so. They're very concerned about employees using unauthorized AI tools. And how do we put a stop to that? Well, you got to give them something.
Right.
Employees are just like hackers. You said earlier, hackers are, looking for the easy way out. Well, I always use this analogy. Tell me if you think you like it. The employees are like water in a river. Any obstacle, you just go around it. And if you don't provide them the right tooling, which AI seems to be the right tooling for everybody nowadays. I saw one report. I don't have the exact source of the report, but it was up to 80% of your employees are using AI, unauthorized AI tools in the business to help them get their jobs done. You need to provide them authorized runs that have, maybe it's an SLM. I don't know if that's a term everyone's heard. It's a small language model. It lives on a client server in your old server room that you might not have used for 5 years, but people are putting new servers in there to run SLMs. So you're not on the public LLM, large language model. And then you can confine all that work and all that data to an offline copy that is a lot smaller, but gives you just about the same results. And it can be very empowering for your employees. So if they have an option to use that, then they should be using that. These are all kinds of things that we're looking at from a CISO lens now. And that's what we lose sleep about, right? How are we going to fix that? How are we going to make that safe?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do like your analogy. I used to study martial arts, so I was a big Bruce Lee fan. So the Mars ready to be water, my friend.
Yeah.
Oh, and
That was my Aikido instructor said that to me one time. It's a repurposed quote from him.
right. And I did have to, just to let you know, I heard you say like on steroids, and I've got like weak knees from playing basketball, and I just got PRP injections at the end of last year. So now my phraseology is it's like this after PRP injection. So I just want to let you know a little bit of difference between this. That steroids may be working for you, but for me it's the PRP injections.
So it worked for you? It did help?
Absolutely.
I've had a PRP in one knee during a AC construction and then a meniscus trim. That was 5 years ago. Then I re-injured it. And on the last repair of the meniscus, I had another damaged meniscus. They put a PRP injection in. So it was after the damage was done. So I'm getting now maybe back to about 95% on my right knee for hockey and those sorts of things.
Sure.
I don't know. If I didn't have it, would I be at 75, 85%? I have no bellwether because it was injured. So I'm curious to hear what your P did for you.
Yeah, I mean, I was getting cortisone and then the other one for probably the past 5 years, and I was still playing basketball like three times a week and stuff, and I was just having continual soreness and stuff. And since then, like I played twice yesterday. Yeah. So I took grade one pretty good.
That's amazing. Good for you.
Well, I mean, that's why I'm the doctor, because I'm injured all the time. I have to be the doctor to make myself better.
That's good.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on a little bit. Let's talk about what I call the heart rate. And that's kind of the performance metric that kind of tells a story for you right now. I think what you threw out at me is that, like, using a service kind of like your Hootfish, from 30% to over 95% training compliance, and then likewise, saw kind of that impact tickets that came out of that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, this is a bigger conversation, I think, Doc. But in essence, cybersecurity for 25, maybe 30 years has been focused on preventing breaches, which is a noble cause, right? But the way they went about it was to punish and test people with these fake email phishing messages that get put into your inbox. And they're meant to trick you into clicking on them, because that's what hackers do. And if you get tricked and you click, then you're punished, shamed. You have a HR meeting, you have a manager meeting. You can't do it 3 times or you're terminated, all kinds of negativity. Remember my multidisciplinary background? Well, psychology says that'll never work. That's an external locus of control. It's superimposed on everyone. The only reason people don't click is because they want to avoid punishment. That doesn't internalize it as a good thing to do, right? Because you're not even teaching the good things to do. You're just punishing the bad things. So what we've done at Hootfish, with Hootfish in my company, CyberHoot, is we've created this positive reinforcement, gamification, leaderboard approach to teaching cyber literacy around phishing, that we like to say we teach people how to fish, feeding them for a lifetime, instead of the old way was to feed them a fish today, feed them a fish tomorrow, and hope that they never go hungry. The reality is it doesn't work because it's not internalized. People get apathetic. It's like if you train a dog with a shock collar versus treats. The dog with the shock collar stops wanting to learn anything, stops wanting to go to the dog park, and they disengage. And that's where that statistic came from. Employees that have been punished too much don't want to do their training. They don't learn, and it's an external, enforcement mechanism. And you have to have it there 100% of the time for it to even have any hope of success. When you turn it into a positive and you reward people for engagement, you reward them by educating them on the things they need to know to be successful, to pass, to climb a leaderboard, or to gain avatars that grow over time, they engage more. And that's where that statistic went from 20% to 80, 85%. But not only that, they enjoy the process more. Think about the dog that gets treats when they go to the dog park to learn new skills. They'll bring you the leash and say, "Can we go? Can we go?" People are no different. When you reward them for engagement and you reward them for learning and for doing well, and they learn how to be competent in their cyber literacy skills, they actually appreciate it, because it's not just at work. As we said earlier, it's personal benefit as well. This applies to your home life and your personal email and your personal finances and all of that. So the reality is, and I'm bragging a little bit, but my company is trying to reorient cybersecurity from a negative punishment-based approach, which there's no science that supports that, by the way, and there's plenty of studies that say it has limited utility, to a positive re-engagement approach where people are rewarded for the good behaviors we want to see more of. It just makes perfect sense. Any parent out there knows how to parent a child with positive reinforcement over punishment, or a dog training, or incarcerated adults. You got to teach those life skills for them to be successful when they leave, so they don't recidivize. The analogies are endless.
Yeah, I mean, I'll make sure and pass along to my wife a husband training program that she needs to get rid of some of the negatives and lean more into the positives, because
Lean all in on the positives. And I bet you it works. It will work. And that's God's honest truth.
I don't know. That trash can, I have to walk by it. I have to drive by it. I have to get out of my driveway by it. But somehow I always forget it. So I guess maybe she does need to do a little bit more than negative or something, or give me better vision. Now, as far as moving the needle from your point of view, you just kind of went through talking about how, from a positive point of view, kind of leaning into it. You felt that your approach is more about the cadence, the tone, the incentives, getting leaders involved, or just making it not feel like it's detention.
You raise so many interesting points that I can take me in different directions. Let me tell you one of the unexpected benefits of the leaderboards we just put in place. We just added this because leaderboards are another way to have a little healthy competition across all the employees. Now, if you have a public leaderboard where you're shaming people that are at the bottom and you're rewarding people at the top, that doesn't work. It's an anonymous leaderboard where all you know is where you sit in the order of the entire company, right? And even HR doesn't get to see that necessarily. Well, we found all of a sudden that the senior leaderships of companies started to do their training because they hate to be last. And they were ignoring the training until that point. Even though they are the most important people to be trained on cyber literacy skills, they just didn't have the time. They didn't see the value in it. But you put a little competition in front of them, and suddenly, boom, up went their training amounts. And they started to climb the leaderboard. And they have a certain life goal and satisfaction about not finishing last and trying to finish first. So that was a really interesting, like, psychological piece that we didn't even anticipate. But the positive reinforcement, let me think back to your question, engagement and the periodicity. People's attention spans since the advent of these mobile phone devices has gone down. We know from scientific research that, you used to have 30 minutes of focused attention, and it's getting shorter and shorter. And some say, I don't know if I agree with this, it's as short as a goldfish, which is 6 or 7 seconds, right, of memory. I don't believe that. But I do know that a 45-minute training once a year will never work for cyber literacy skills. And I get a sense that you really like analogies. So my analogy is like those people that go to the gym in January and they do a 6-hour workout on the first day because they are going to make a difference in their life. And they end up hurting themselves and they never go back because they're so sore they can't get out of bed the next day and they quit. Well, why would you think that a cyber educational, 2-hour seminar once a year is going to be any different? You need muscle memory. You need HIIT cyber training, right? High intensity interval training, short bits, multiple times a month, is ideal. Now we do it really just once or twice a month for 3 to 5 minutes in the exercises that CyberHoot sends out. But any short intensity training that is educational, positive reinforcement that sends a single message. You can't have 12 messages in 1 minute. You can have one message in a minute and people will internalize it. And if they enjoy doing it, maybe they go home and they talk about it over dinner with their spouse or with their kids. I don't know, but we're trying to impart things with analogies from the real world in little tiny snippets, and they're memorable and people tend to engage again because it plays out their leaderboard rank, it plays out their avatar rank. They get certificates of completion. We had some companies you walk into and they've got 12 certificates on their cubicle wall of all the exercises they've completed. It's a badge of honor.
Sure.
It's creating a culture of cyber literacy. Doesn't matter how they get there, so long as they get there, right? And it comes from multiple little tiny engagements throughout over the course of time.
And that makes me think of a couple of things. First, the book, The Power of Habit. And it's not just cybersecurity. It could be leadership training. It could be, anything in your organization, depending on the role, that how important training is to the brain, ongoing training to make that person, feel that mastery within their role or mastery within the things that they do. And so beyond habit, beyond having a rhythm, you just kind of mentioned kind of your, I guess, minimum viable training rhythm for cybersecurity. I think it can never be just a one-time event. You've got to have that every year. And as a company that's been around for 20 years, we still run into it of where we're talking about a topic and I'm surprised that how can nobody in the company know about this? And then I realized, oh, it's been 2 years since we talked about that. I need to make sure that that's part of that. As a leader, as a manager, I need to take control of that communication rhythm and make sure that, bring this up regular, consistently, improved each time to keep going with it. And then the second thing is there's this thing, they call it the user risk report. I love that thing, but throughout it's a statistic, something like 40% of people who've been through training many times will still miss that and click the link or whatever. And it wasn't because they didn't know, it's just because the busyness of the average person on a typical day. They get so rushed, they're trying to get to everything and they click on it. One time I went to that cybersecurity conference I mentioned, and one of the CISOs fessed up and goes, okay, so I ended up on the click report and almost never heard the end of it. But we just get so busy doing all the stuff that we have to do that we have to force it into a habit. Otherwise, it's easy to miss.
Yeah. In You're absolutely right. Everything you just said is exactly on point. I do find that a lot of the training that is out there, and especially this old punishment-based fake email messages to the inbox, and the corollary, if you fail that, you have to watch this 30, 45-minute video. There was a study last summer that came out that said 10 seconds is the average time that a person that failed one of those phishing tests spent watching that 45-minute video. So they disengage entirely because they're just not in the mood to learn anything. They're mad or ignoring it for making a mistake on something they don't feel like they were properly taught. So many of the exercises that are out there are not teaching the skill set you need. Even the domain name of the sender in those fake messages has absolutely no relationship to the vendor being impersonated, so that you could look at it and easily identify it's a phish, because it says it's from Microsoft, but it's from a domain of account resets or us. Clearly that's wrong.
Right.
But that's the best you can do in fake email phish testing for a variety of legal and financial and technical reasons. You cannot register an RN Microsoft domain name in an email you send through the body, the ether, into the inboxes of your users. But that's what hackers can do and do. So even the analogies and the training that we're giving to people is not building the correct muscle memory. It's like going to a bench press machine and saying, okay, we're going to do this 100 times over the course of the year, and then we're going to measure you on the leg press machine. How does that translate? It doesn't really. You were practicing one thing and now you're being asked to do another. It's not, doesn't relate. That's what the level of our technology is today, short of proper simulations. Again, if you do the right training and you get the right, HIIT training, those little tiny snippets, and they teach you, oh, look for light typo squatted domain names where an O is for a zero, or a zero is for an O, or a missing letter, or a period in the wrong spot. That's how hackers hack us. And that's how you're going to have that quick muscle memory when you get that busy email and you're doing 1,000 things and you go to click on it, but you wait just a second here. Let me check it. Oh my God, there's a 3 for an E, or there's something wrong with it. It's just enough to trick your memory, and that doesn't become a major mental taxation point. It's really just almost like an automatic reaction. Somebody throws a ball at you, you're like, I caught it, but I didn't even think about it. Well, that's what we're trying to teach in the phishing.
Absolutely, yeah. And you heard it here, folks. Stop sending out memos about TPS reports. Take people out to lunch and discuss TPS report formatting with them, or something like that. I'm not sure where I was going with that, but it sounded good for a second.
Positive reinforcement gets what you want, right?
That's right. All right, let's go ahead and keep the ball rolling. Let's talk a little bit about weight, and I think that's probably what's going to be most important to our audience. Small business owners, local government executives. Typically they're not managing IT directly. They're not hands-on with technology, but they're expected to somehow understand what to ask, what to talk about, how to lead, how to manage, how to expect people that might actually begin with technology. So as far as the weight, what's the strategy metric that leaders know about? You again reference Verizon DBIR from 2024 and throw out a number that 68% of breaches involve a non-malicious human element. Can you talk a little bit about that and what truths a leader should take away from that?
Yeah. So if you want the single biggest way companies in the mid-market and smaller are breached, it's typically through phishing emails and social engineering, which leads to the statistic of unintentional mistakes by humans. There are a bunch of others that humans make too that are unintentional. There was, almost every Chinese person in the world, or Chinese person in China, was part of a database in the government police force that was open to the public for a period of time, when one of their database administrators asked for help on a public forum and pasted his database administrative file in to say, can you help me troubleshoot this, because I can't get it to work? And it had the credentials in it. So, there's a billion Chinese people whose records are in that database, and it was sucked out by most nation states of the world within 24 hours. That's a mistake. It's not of the kind we think of every day. Just accidental mistakes can really expose us. But by far and away, the most common method that mid-market and smaller companies are breached is by social engineering, typically tied to a persuasive, maybe even spear phishing campaign, where they feed the AI agent creating these spear phishing emails your social media profile. And it creates 10 different, very appealing emails that, Steve Meeks would like to click on, Craig Taylor would like to click on, because it pertains to things that we enjoy or are passionate about. So that means you have to focus on the human. Humans are still the weakest link in the chain, generally speaking, at the mid-market and down. And so what you want to do is engage your people, educate them, govern them. One that's often forgotten is governance. Do you have a robust set of information security policies around data governance, password management, incident response, maybe for your IT team, patch management? All these different governance procedures and policies you need to run your business are very important, because people will play by the rules, generally speaking, if they know what they are. But if you have never codified that or shared it or communicated or updated it, I've been to many businesses, and I'm sure you have too, Steve, where the human resources book or the handbook is 150 pages and it's just collecting dust. You can run your finger and get the dust off the book because it's been on the shelf since they started 10 years ago. Not once was it opened. So you got to avoid those things and really think about humans as the weakest link in the chain. And you can put as much technology in place to prevent the simple mistakes, and that does help. But you still need to educate and train and govern as well.
So do you have tips on how to make sure that that reaches the lowest levels of the organization? It's a 150-page document. Based on what you just said about an organization dealing with, like a 150-page IT policy, what's your advice to a smaller organization who's challenged with, how do I make sure everybody in the organization knows our expectations of them? How do I make sure that all of those policies get down to everybody? What are your tips to help organizations?
150 pages will never work with anybody. I don't care unless you have a gun to your head. You're not going to You're not going to go read through 150 pages.
Maybe not even that.
Yeah, not even that. So what you have to do is put it into bite-sized policies. When we roll our vCISO services out, we have 6 governance policies and 4 governance and 2 procedures that we put out. And all the employees of the companies that are working at at our vCISO clients have to read and abide by 4 policies: acceptable use of computers, including AI provisions in there about using authorized AI products, not using your phone, all the prescriptions that pertain to that. But it's 4 pages. Acceptable use. A password policy that also is prescriptive in that we want you to adopt a password manager. We know that without that, you're reusing passwords across your employee base. A password manager will helpfully, over time, get people to unique passwords wherever they go. And it's all, it even helps when someone leaves, you can hand their passwords for their job responsibilities over to the next person. And then it's a smoother transition. There's some really interesting benefits there. But a password manager, password policy, 15-character passwords that don't expire, that aren't complex, that are passphrase based. And really, most of them are randomly generated by the password manager. You only remember your passphrase for your password manager. That's the second policy. Third is data governance policy, which says, we have 3 kinds of data here. We have general public data, anything you publish in a newspaper or online in your Facebook pages, that's public data. It's not something you're worried about publishing. Sensitive is non-regulatory data, salary information, strategic plans, maybe some IP. Critical data is all regulated data, right? Healthcare data, HIPAA data, Social Security numbers, financial data, all that. Know what those are, train your users on that, have them label that, and know what their responsibilities are. You can't just email sensitive or confidential data wherever you want. It just is going into the public domain when you do that. You have to treat it very carefully and encrypt it. The fourth is the WISP, the Written Information Security Plan, which contains a whole bunch of overarching technology protections. Like, we're going to give you CrowdStrike on your computer to help protect it. We're going to give you a password manager. We're going to train you with an LMS on other emerging threats that you need to be aware of so that you don't get socially engineered over the phone or in an email. All of that is prescribed in that WISP. That's that almost a public-facing our cyber program document. Those 4 amount to 25 pages max. That's something you need to send out to them every year. Give them a legally binding signature to sign off that they've read it and they'll follow it. And if they don't, they don't. But you've done your legal responsibility and you've given them every opportunity, and you've done the work by taking it from 150 pages and shrinking it down to 20 or 25 pages. And, that's about the most you can do. There's that old saying, lead a horse to water, can't make him drink. Now, only my dad, who is 88, would know what that meant because he rode a horse to school, but I don't know what it means. And I think it just
My dad did too.
did he really? Okay, there you go. Yeah. So those are some of the strategies I would use to employ to make sure. And then have a culture of cybersecurity. And again, the biggest thing you can do is reward good behavior. So publicly shout out people who are compliant on all their policies, who have done their assigned trainings, reward, maybe have a random drawing once a quarter for a free lunch for anybody that's 100% on their assigned, cyber literacy training or their policies, whatever you can do to make it more of a positive and a culture that recognizes and rewards engagement in cybersecurity.
Yeah, I think you hit on a very important point there that and just talking about passwords, that when we thought having a complex password and changing it all the time would make us more secure, and then it turned out it didn't. We had to come around and go, okay, that's not working. Let's do something different. And I think that the same is kind of true about the policy manual, that we try to throw every single thing in there into that policy manual, hoping that everybody remembers everything. But that's really hard to do. So finding those most important aspects, simplifying the manual so that they can get access or retain that information that they need to, and then put them through it. Just being understanding that I think nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, hey, you know what? Ugh, I want to suck at work today. People generally want to do well and want to feel successful, but sometimes we have to help them get there by making things a little bit more palatable, a little bit easier, or where we're getting the results that we want. Those results being, hey, they're complying with the bulk of the stuff that we've determined is most important to make sure that we're staying secure.
Exactly right.
So along with that, one thing that I think kind of piggybacks off of that, and the 2025 DBIR, there was a metric that kind of kept that user-based, that human element number about the same. I think it was about 60% breaches, but third-party involvement represented, I think it like doubled from maybe 15% to 30%. What's your advice to organizations who have third parties that work with them? You're securing them, you're helping them out, but how do you help them understand the blind spot from any of their third parties or contractors?
Well, as a CISO, and we actually had a conversation recently about should we change the name from CISO to cyber or cybersecurity leadership? And I think there's some merits to changing the role from fractional to cybersecurity leadership, but that's another conversation. It's all about business risk, though. This is the nature of a CISO engagement from our book, what we provide our clients. And so when you look at third parties, you have two different kinds of risks. You can have a third party that has an incident, goes out of business, and can't provide you the services that you need. If you don't have a secondary or a backup or a plan B, you could be dead in the water because of someone else's failure, right?
Supply chain.
So supply chain risk, right? But in addition, there are third parties that have breaches of them own. Maybe they don't go out of business, but they've had a breach or they've put you at risk, right? There's trust relationships. One of the big areas now is integrations, API integrations, and you grant access to your systems to all these third parties and they grant reverse access to you. And nobody's policing this and reviewing it and minimizing the permissions and privileges and redacting them and retrieving them when they're no longer in use. All of that represents risk as well. And we're seeing more of the API threats. If you look at a lot of the breaches that happened with Salesforce were of the Fortune 500 companies of the world were tied back to API use of the Salesforce platform. And hackers were able to call Salesforce support and say, "Hey, I'm a worker at this company. The API is not working. Can you help me get it back up and working?" And they were giving keys away, and they were doing all sorts of dangerous things. It wasn't really difficult for the hackers to gain access and then see all of the works, the top of funnel and folks in that Salesforce environment. So you have to know what you're using. You have to review it on an ongoing basis. Programs that we established called third-party risk management programs, where in the simplest version, we just asked your vendors, give us a list of your top 20 vendors that you rely on, depend on, and we'll go inspect their SOC 2 Type 2 audits. We'll ask them cybersecurity questionnaires if they don't have something that is meaningful enough, and we'll just do basically a red, yellow, green assessment of their cyber preparedness and the resilience. If you have nothing, that's better than nothing. And as you get more mature, you can up the ante a little bit and go a little further. So these things have to be done. It is a growing risk because, again, what we find with hackers is that they change their tactics and their techniques over time. When you plug a hole here in the dike, right?
Okay.
If you plug that up here, they move on to another crack and they wedge their finger in that crack until they get their foot in the door, and then they break in another way. So you have to constantly be adapting to the DBIR reports, and there's a great case. It's been phishing for 15, 20 years. Now third party and supply chain and API and AI are all starting to come into focus because there are other ways into businesses to cause, be able to extort for money.
Yeah, I like, red, yellow, green. I'm fond of saying that as an executive myself, over the years, I've had to deal with things that I may not be an expert at, whether it's accounting or HR or whatever. And as an executive, I don't really have to be a subject matter expert in all of those topics. I just need someone on my team to help me understand what happens if I go left, what happens if I go right. And I like how you simplified it into a red, yellow, green, and to probably plenty for the typical executive with the typical smaller organization needs, as opposed to having to do a full, probability, impact, whatever, kind of detailed kind of thing that you're doing. Just giving them just enough information to make good decisions in their own best interest.
Exactly right. Yeah. And don't do it just from a cyber literacy perspective, right? You can do SOC 2 type 2 controls, or if they have some security components, I think it's part of most SOC 2 assessments. You could look at a company as a cyber threat to your business. But you also have to ask that other business disruption problem where a sole source provider suddenly goes out of business or has a ransomware event of their own and can't serve you anymore. You need to say, well, what's our plan B? And that's a risk, a business risk as well. So as CISOs of the world, take heed. It's not just about cybersecurity. It's the entire gamut of business risks and business disruptions that come into play.
Yeah, we have within our organization, last year we called it like our security officer meeting, but our initiative. But we took one of our quarterly meetings and we had a detailed discussion about, just risk at all, and had a whole bunch of topics that we dug into. But, mainly was discussing first party, third party risk, and, things that go along with it and how it fits in to all of organizational risk, and the different ways to mitigate risk and stuff like that. And it seemed like the audience took it in a whole different vein than they ever had before. And even stuff like, if there's a recommendation that I have for you, I'm not just making this stuff up. If I'm looking at your compliance or CIS version 8.1, version 8.1 and IG1, there's like 56 different controls. I'm not making those up, but I got to keep bringing to you the top 3 things that I think are going to help you. Because if I don't, then I leave you in a vulnerable position.
Right.
You-
100%.
You're still the owner. You still get to decide what you do and what you don't do. But, I'm like your doctor. I got to keep telling you that, hey, you could work on your diet a little bit. I know you haven't made any improvements on your weight, but let's talk about weight again, or, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, I think CISOs and doctors are one and the same, right? The doctor says to the patient, smoke less, drink less, eat more healthy, get some exercise, sleep more, but it's up to you to do them all, right? And so we're there advising our clients, our customers, here's the top 10 risks. And I know you have finite time and money to spend on this. So here's what we've agreed in dialogue between your IT department, your CISO, your leadership team, and everybody else. We've all rated these risks across administrative, technical, physical risks, and business risks. And here's the list. And here's what bubbled up to the top. So if you want to deal with these top 5 things, here's what's going to cost you in terms of time and money. But when you make the decision to spend it on those 5 things, you at least have common agreement across all the interested parties. If you've had them at the table and you've talked it through, you've all agreed these are the top 5. When we do our assessments at CyberHoot, we add materiality to that list of prioritization metrics. You have impact, probability, materiality. What falls into materiality, some people listening might ask, well, if you have a third party questionnaire that comes into your business every year and it asks you the same question, and 5 of your clients ask that same question of you, and you don't have a good answer today, but you need one, that boosts that importance of that particular remediation effort up the list because everybody's asking for it
Right.
and you don't have a good answer. If you have a strategic goal that you're going to expand into this marketplace next year and you're going to grow your business, then a threat or a risk in that area that prevents you from going into that marketplace gets higher materiality because it's going to prevent your goals as a business. There's nowhere in the NIST standard that says that plays into it. But I don't care. It's a business risk. It needs to be put into business terms and it needs to filter into your prioritized work. So that's why we added it. I think it makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. Not prioritizing, kind of based on applicability and currentness, timeliness, all of those kinds of things is so important.
Mm.
Just the nature of all the things that we have to keep up with. No organization has unlimited budget or time or whatever. So I like materiality, as a way to kind of help get that proper prioritization in that, it's looking at its impact on the business.
Yep.
Well, hey, gosh, it's been a good doctor's visit, but everything's checking out pretty good, Craig. So before we step out of this appointment, I always ask my guests if there was like one truth you want the listeners to carry with them. Kind of that steady North Star for security, and kind of this noisy environment that we paint. What would you say that is?
Wow. So I know that we prepared for this. I'm trying to remember my answer, but I think I'll answer it a different way. So we know that humans are usually the weakest link, but if you only had one thing you could do to help secure your organization, I would say the North Star from a cybersecurity perspective is your, you know, MFA enablement and removal of all exceptions. I can tell you that across the last, say, 10 years and 100 incidents that I've been a part of, if it wasn't half, it was at least 40% had an MFA account that was disabled. And so the hacker just got in with a username password. You can buy billions of usernames and passwords online now in the dark web. Anyone you want, any company you want, you can get credentials that worked at some point and just keep trying them on the VPNs and the SSLs and all of the remote access that you can find. So that's probably the one thing I would say to start with.
That's how I got your MySpace account, in case you were wondering.
Yeah. I don't know if I still have one. I think I might. I don't know. I have to go check.
Yeah. Actually, one time I looked and I think they're still in business and doing stuff, but it wasn't interesting enough for me to kind of pursue it any further other than, oh, wow, they're still in business. Any other prescriptions, additional takeaways that you have for the audience? Things you recommend, podcast, books, articles, content?
Oh, gosh. Ben Franklin probably said it once best about cybersecurity. And it wasn't about cybersecurity, it was about fire prevention, right? He said an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And he was talking about stopping fires from starting to begin with. But the same is true today. The best analogy is with cybersecurity is a little bit of prevention goes a long way and can save you headaches and thousands of dollars, if not, for the larger companies listening to this, millions of dollars. Hopefully, if you spend it in the right ways and you address it, just be proactive about the threats and risks that you face. Do those assessments that you need to do to identify and uncover the risks, because if you don't know about them, you can't fix them. And get good advice from a fractional CISO. When you hire one of ours or anyone out there, you're hiring someone that supports dozens of companies typically. And if they're part of a peer group, they're exposed to hundreds of companies and what's working and what's not working in those companies. If you hire your own CISO or you have your own internal IT team, they're really islands onto themselves and they have a hard time sometimes. The good ones don't, but the mediocre ones don't know to reach out and ask questions from these groups that are out there. So you're benefiting by having that breadth and depth and width perspective from those CISOs that you hire. And hopefully that can help identify and tease out a risk you didn't know you had and in time for you to remediate it before it becomes an issue.
I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah, I think, it's easy to see like one solution to fix all things or, get into a routine of only doing things certain ways. But the value of peering, whether it's cybersecurity or running your business, it's great to have alternate voices, inside your organization, whoever you are. I always like to say, we're a big fan of peering, but I want people to challenge me. I want people to have a different opinion. It's hard to do in the organization where I'm a primary leader, and outside the organization, in peer groups, peer associations, whatever, I'm more likely to get someone who'll go, well, I don't quite see it that way. And I'm like, well, help me understand, help me understand. Good stuff. Well, that kind of brings us, to the end of our podcast. Hopefully well for you.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah, this is awesome. I love the line of inquiry, and it's an area that I think is underrepresented today. So good to expose your listeners to it.
Well, I think after, when all's said and done, well, actually, before we do that, how can people reach you if they want to reach out?
Oh, thanks. Thanks. So you can go to cyberhoot.com and book a meeting for an overview or look at our vCISO offering. Anyone that signs up for our product offering will get 20% off with Talk to the Doc as the referral code. You get 20% off on the first year as an incentive to use your listening and podcast and to your own company's benefit. We do free trials and all that good stuff. So there's no risk to you as well.
Awesome. Well, for myself, you can always reach me at the doctor, all spelled out, THEDOCTOR, at fulcrumgroup.net, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Make sure you reference the podcast because I get tons of requests every week, and I think I've got about 300 saved up that I didn't reply to because it was obviously a sales call about to happen. And that brings us to the end of today's doctor's appointment. Hopefully today, if it proved anything, I think that it should be that cybersecurity gets a whole lot scary when you treat it like a business decision. Craig made reference to starting with a risk register. We talked about having a healthy security rhythm and a culture that helps people win instead of catching them do things wrong. So thanks for your time today. Thanks for listening in. Be sure to like or follow on your favorite podcast forum. And remember, nobody's too small to be targeted. So thanks for the day. Hope you got a lot out of it. I'm your host, Steve, the Dr. Meek, and the doctor is out. See you next time. Thanks, Craig.
You're welcome. Thanks, Steve.